Well, welcome to our second of three debates at Asheville High School, the 2015-2016 academic year. And what I'd like you to do right now is put your hands together for a great activity at the high school, the Asheville High Silsa Speech and Debate Club. So give them a hand. Now, I'm proud. My name is Jim Stokely, and I'm proud this evening to represent the co-sponsor of this debate series, the Wilma Dykeman Legacy. We're a local nonprofit organization. We were formed in 2012, and the purpose was to sustain the core values of an extraordinary Buncombe County native named Wilma Dykeman. She was born at the head of Beaver Dam Valley, just north of Asheville, and died in 2006 at the Care Partners Hospice on Sweeten Creek. One of Wilma's core values was the power of the spoken word. And what better way to illustrate that power than by debating the issues of the day through a structured discussion between matched sides. Now remember that, structured discussion between matched sides, in no way like our current political debates. Right. The great community interest in our first debate last November encouraged us to do this second debate, as well as a third and final debate scheduled for April 8th on the subject of whether marijuana should be legalized. We're excited about the topic tonight because there's so many people in Western North Carolina who are vested in various ways in farming, food quality, and the provision of food to those who need it. Now, it takes a lot of work and money to produce events like this, and the funds generated by local friends of Wilma Dykeman go directly to honoraria for the debaters, as well as local advertising. So please look at the brochure inserted in your program. Consider becoming a friend of Wilma Dykeman. And right now I'm going to stop, and I'm going to give the floor to the best student liaison anyone could ever have, Miss Chloe Dennison.
My name is Chloe Dennison, and I am a member of the student leadership on the Asheville High School speech and debate team. Debate is an invaluable activity for many students at the high school. This debate is somewhat unique in that the sides were pre-chosen. However, at the high school, we force debaters to prepare arguments for both sides of the topic. This enables them to gain understandings of other perspectives than they likely would have otherwise. Our student judges have been instructed to vote based on the content of the debate and not their personal issues. I think we can all agree that everyone in our society deserves an equal voice. So I would like to introduce our moderator for today's debate, Mr. John Boyle, Asheville's Answer Man.
Good evening, everyone. I first apologize for being late. Jim called me. I was sitting at my desk writing my Sunday column. So for all those who have thought for years that he never puts much forethought and time into those columns, you can see when I write them. I do apologize for being late. I thought it was at 6 o'clock. So you can tell the debaters are much smarter than I am. I don't know if you came to the last debate. These are really fantastic events, but they are very structured debating style. So don't expect a screaming, yelling back and forth like you saw last night with the Republicans. My favorite part of the debate last night was when there was so much yelling going on, CNN just put down in the subtitles, unintelligible yelling. So we are not going to have any unintelligible yelling here tonight, okay? We agree to that. We got some great guests here. Y'all can see in your programs. You can read along with me, but I'm going to introduce these folks and tell you a little bit about them. Chuck Francis, all the way here on my right. He grew up in Haywood County on a farm. He got a bachelor's degree in horticultural science from North Carolina State University in 1978. So Chuck, that dates you a little bit there, I think. He worked as a sales rep for several agricultural products companies. From 82 to 90, farmed with his father in Haywood County. 1988 was named Outstanding Young Male Farmer of the Year by North Carolina Department of Agriculture. He's currently location manager in Hendersonville for Coastal Agro Business And he serves as chairman of the Haywood County Board of Education, which has been a very tough job of late. I'm sure he could tell you, I know y'all probably know what's going on over there, but they've had to close the school and had some rough times. Could be another good debate topic one day. Bill Yarborough here closest to my right. I have bothered Bill many times over the years as an expert source on stories. He's an extremely knowledgeable agronomist. Bill also graduated from NC State with a degree in soil science. He serves on the North Carolina Soil and Water Conservation Commission. He's been extremely active in promoting soil and water conservation, serving on numerous boards and commissions. In 2010, he received the President's Award from North Carolina Association of Soil and Water Conservation, and in 2011 was inducted into the WNC Agriculture Hall of Fame. I can also tell you, Bill knows a little something about every kind of agriculture out there. I've called him on everything under the sun. Good guy. On my left and your right, closest to me, is Jamie Ager, is the fourth generation of the family to farmer's land at Hickory Nut Gap. I learned something interesting about the Ager farm. It was called Cheryl's Inn. The house out there, it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest buildings in the county. Don't know if you read that, but your dad helped me out with that, or John helped me out with that. He and his wife, Amy Fry Ager, graduates of Warren Wilson College and have worked to develop Hickory Nut Gap Farm using sustainable agricultural practices for the last 15 years. In 2001, they won the Achievement Award from Farm Bureau, and their operation received the 2011 North Carolina Company to Watch Award. And if you've ever had any of their meat products, you know it's good stuff. I've had way too much myself. Jamie, y'all do a great job. John's, round of applause. You gotta applaud me. John Swann, on my far left, your far right, has been active in the food industry for 40 years, held management and ownership positions in many different companies in the natural food industry, decades of experience in retail and importing, regional distribution, including pretty much every big store in Asheville you could think of: Earth Fare, Green Life, Katua Market, and Harvest Grocery. He's been active in local food, economic development, been on the board of directors for the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project for 10 years. Round of applause for all these gentlemen. And we will get started here momentarily.
Without further ado, thank you for my debate group here. Thank you for John Boyle. Thank you for coming out for this important event. Think globally, act locally. You've seen that on bumper stickers. To me, this is not a debate bidding organic against conventional ag. I celebrate each, and I've worked with both of them throughout my career. I do disagree with the claims by many and have sincere concerns over the effects, policy decisions based on these claims, particularly as they relate to our soil and water resources. I read once that the difference in organic and traditional is feeding your neighbor or feeding the world. Thus, think globally, act locally. The need for food: be 2 billion more people on this planet by 2050, according to the UN. In that amount of time, from now till 2050, we have to produce more food than we've produced in the last 10,000 years combined. Say that again. We have to produce more food from now to 2050 than we've produced in the last 10,000 years combined. Second point, the loss of farmland. As an example, the U.S. lost 8.5 million acres in the last 10 years alone to other uses. Our best farmland is where the Walmarts and the roads and the schools and all of us have. 120,000 farms, according to the U.S. Census of Ag. 100,000 acres in North Carolina alone every year for the last 10 years. We lead the nation in that. Each person that moves to North Carolina takes 2.1 acres when you add it all up. Third, labor. According to the National Agricultural Statistics Service, each farmer today feeds 155 people, yet less than 1% of us farm. In 1900, there was 75 million people in the U.S., 38% farmed. Everybody had a garden. Today, there's 315 million people in this United States. 1% farm. Gardens are where? What worked before the Green Revolution cannot work today because there's no labor. 4, competitive disadvantage to the South. The top U.S. 5 organic sales, milk, eggs, broilers, lettuce, and apples, all have a functional disadvantage here in the South because of disease, insects, and our climate. So we have to bring products in to be able to feed those broilers and that milk supply. 5, is economy of scale. According to the National Ag Statistics Service, there's 14,000 certified organic farms in the United States. Big number, isn't it? Fastest growing part of ag, and I celebrate that. But there's 2 million conventional farms. 87% are family farms. In North Carolina, there's 264 certified organic farms, according to the Statistics Service. 50,000 conventional. 6, soil and water conservation issues. For over 100 years, we plowed and dished the land in the Great Plains. Dust Bowl came in the 30s. People left the farm. That's where the carbon loss is. It was sequestered in those grasslands. We washed it into the Delta. It ended up in the Mississippi just like that. We're still having the effects of that. Statement, quote, crop production is not sustainable as we do it today. When was that written? Hugh Hammond Bennett wrote it in 1934. He was the father of soil conservation. He became the leader of the soil conservation movement. He realized what we were doing was wrong. For these few reasons in the last 4 minutes, I do not believe organic production can feed the world, nor overcome food insecurity in the U.S., nor the world. I celebrate both. I just don't believe it can happen. Thank you.
Bill was right on time with that. I'm not going to go through how each one of these works, but I should have told you there's a constructive argument from each side first. They have a crossfire. There'll be rebuttals, crossfires. This goes on. It's a very organized setup here. So each one right now has 4 minutes. They're holding up time placards that come at 2 minutes, 45 seconds, 10 seconds remaining. So we will keep them right on time here. So now the con side, you've got 4 minutes.
Thank you all for being here tonight, and it's a real opportunity to be here to discuss agriculture and what we're doing. My grandmother, Elsa Clark, was a good friend of Wilma Dykeman Stokely's, and Mrs. Dykeman Stokely's legacy of environmental stewardship and her appreciation of Western North Carolina had a strong impact on me as I came of age at Hickory Nut Gap Farm out in Fairview. I also want to mention how deeply I respect our esteemed colleagues on the other side here. Their commitment to the farming community of Western North Carolina cannot be overstated. Food security has been a concern for human beings forever. The entire social and political fabric of every civilization is built on having a consistent food supply. The global food supply has grown exceedingly over the past 100 years as science and technology have combined to create the most productive food system the world has ever seen. Never before in history have so few fed so many. However, the circumstances that helped create this abundant food supply of cheap grains has also come with legitimate concerns. The environmental problems associated with modern agriculture are documented. Monocropping, overgrazing, and the overuse of antibiotics in meat production are a few of the challenges that modern agriculture is confronted with. In addition, defining efficiency as the only metric when studying agriculture abandons the diversity of thought required to build a more resilient and durable global food supply for the future. The resolution we are considering today resolved. The organic food and eat local movements will never substantially address food insecurity is not true. Current mainstream agriculture thought has a message to young farmers these days. Farmers should continue to adopt efficient methods of production in order to feed the world. This has resulted in a mentality that farmers either have to get big or to get out. As a result, small and medium-sized farms have found little place in this paradigm. And as a child on a small family farm in western North Carolina, my parents, being the loving people that they were, strongly discouraged me from coming back to the farm to try to make a living. As loving parents, their concerns that we would never possibly make a living on the family farm were very and completely legitimate. Fortunately, they let me try 15 years ago, and their concerns have largely been dispelled due to the local and organic food movement in Asheville and the surrounding area. The options successful farmers have adopted and are continuing to adopt in the get big or get out philosophy is to grow larger and larger. As consumers demand cheaper food, most full-time farmers have to farm at least 1,000 plus acres of land in order to make sure there's enough income to cover the costs associated with equipment, seed, chemicals, etc., to make that a viable enterprise. This scaled type of agriculture does create a cheap food supply, but does not necessarily guarantee long-term food security. The local and organic movements contribute significantly to long-term food security in a number of ways. Innovation and entrepreneurship. Many farms that market locally have a direct relationship with customers that they interact with on a frequent basis. Marketing through farmers markets and CSAs gives farmers and eaters the chance to interact with one another and share information. These conversations between consumers and farmers allow for adaptations and different production paradigms that might not otherwise exist. And because these farms are typically smaller, the farms are more adaptable and able to change. Culturally, this breeds a more dynamic and entrepreneurial culture in agriculture, which ultimately has the potential to lead to broader change and affect larger agricultural paradigms. Does that mean I'm done? Okay, good. Sorry. Rural economic development. Numerous studies indicate that food produced and consumed locally creates more economic activity in an area than does a comparable food produced and imported from a non-local source. Economic activity typically improves the following three categories: increased farm income, increased income to other local businesses, and more local jobs. While we don't propose that the local organic food movement can immediately replace the larger food paradigm, we do propose that a vibrant, innovative, entrepreneurial, localized agriculture can help lay the groundwork for a more robust food system that contributes significantly to all of our food security.
Good time in there. I feel like the human hook coming in and pulling him out. This is where it gets a little fun. There is called a crossfire, and last time we did this between all four, and it was a little cumbersome. This time it's going to be a crossfire just between the two speakers you heard. They have 3 minutes to go back and forth. Typically, one will ask the other a question, answer. I may prod them along if somebody's getting a little long-winded because they've only got 3 minutes. So. Since Jamie just finished, I guess we'll let Bill start with a question.
Yes, sir. Jamie, what do you consider a small farm size? You mentioned several numbers there.
Right, and that's a really hard number to ultimately come up with as far as that goes. I think generally speaking, probably between I don't know, does USDA have a definition of a small farm?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, I mean, I think smaller vegetable operations up to, and it's more that medium-sized farm, between less than 500 acres.
Less than 500 acres.
Something like that.
Is a small farm. The average farm in North Carolina is 137 acres.
Right.
Out of 50,000 conventional farms. Okay, your turn, I think.
Right, but I would argue that the most of those farms, generally speaking, what's happened in agriculture is in order to make a living, especially in eastern North Carolina and the Piedmont of North Carolina where there's a lot of row crop farming, the challenge is you have to, in order to pay for all your equipment and everything else, you need to lease a number of farms in order to justify the economic side of managing all that equipment. So the typical farm that I read about is 1,100 acres plus on a row crop operation in order to justify the economics of that. And that's, I think that contributes towards a larger problem in agriculture as agriculture gets more concentrated. Okay.
Would you want to
I was going to ask the question. Yeah. So how do we create more economic value on these smaller farms and more regionalistic systems that can encourage those farms to stay in business. That's the main thing that I think that local agriculture provides.
I think in the question it says about local, yes, but it also mentions about being organic.
Right.
I celebrate the fact of local.
Right.
We have farms today in western North Carolina that are farming 10 acres, full-time farm on vegetables. They're not organic, they're conventional, but they're making a living. If we could actually add to that, they do sell local product. If we can ask, anything they bring in helps on that, sir.
Well, yeah, and I think that you're right. Like the local farms and organic, and the way I read that is sort of this sort of curiosity about local agriculture, and the local agriculture, local and organic movement is comprehensive, and it's not just sort of a conventional versus organic.
Well, see, that's what the question is, though. The question on this, the organic food and the eat local movements will never substantially address food insecurity. I want to make sure you understand what I'm doing.
I think they're two distinct things in that question is the way I interpret that.
But I'm looking at it, if it is somebody grows it and they sell it locally, we'll celebrate it. The problem, the question is, can organic be sustainable and overcome food insecurity worldwide?
And that's a great question that's got a lot of science on both sides that is a broad question. And my challenge is, and maybe you have a good answer for this, is when scientists and analysis have looked at this.
Time.
Okay.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Y'all can pick that back up afterwards.
Yeah.
Outside, take it outside. All right, now we have a rebuttal from the pro side. This will be a rebuttal. Each side will get 4 minutes to what was just said there. So pro side, take it away, 4 minutes.
Thank you for this opportunity to address such an important topic. I would also like to thank everyone who is responsible for this event and all the hard work I know that went into planning and putting on this event. Our food supply, not only here in the United States but around the world, has become of utmost importance as our population explodes to over 9 billion people by 2050, as predicted by the United Nations. Current production will have to double to meet this type of demand. Can locally grown organic production meet this demand? The current data does not support this assumption. Organic yields are lagging behind conventional agriculture, as the best case scenario shows a 19.2% deficit, and this was by a study from the University of California in Berkeley in 2010 as a result of over 115 different studies worldwide. Organic crops do not provide any extra nutritional value, as evidenced by a study in 2009 by the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, which states, I quote, "Based on the current evidence, the review suggests that organically and conventionally produced crops and livestock products are broadly comparable in their nutrient content." Number 3, only two, and I quote, "Only two principles really distinguish organic farming from other farming methods. Soluble mineral inputs are prohibited, and synthetic herbicides and pesticides are rejected in favor of natural pesticides. But agriculture based on these principles results in a more costly product, mainly because of lower yields and inefficient use of land." This is from an article from Nature magazine, March 22nd, by Anthony Trewaris. Number 4, organic farming is often considered safer to the environment and consumer, but I disagree. Conclusions from studies have shown more land would be required to produce equal yields, thus reducing land available to non-agricultural uses such as wildlife habitats. Pesticide usage by organic farmers oftentimes exceeds that of conventional growers, and some of the products, even though they are natural when used in quantities to be effective, have to be used in large amounts, or not really environmentally friendly. Number 5, where will the land come from to feed 9 billion people? As Bill stated earlier, and I quote, "A conventional farm can match organic yields using only 50 to 70% of the farmland." This is from an article in Plant Protection Science, Volume 45, published in 2009. Number 6, many organic pesticides, although they are considered natural, do not mean they are non-toxic to the user or consumer. In a published study in 1992, mancozeb, a conventional fungicide, and I quote, "In terms of environmental impact, mancozeb is superior in all categories compared to copper sulfate," unquote. Copper sulfate, a commonly used organic fungicide, is more toxic to earthworms, birds, and small animals, and persists in the soil as it is non-biodegradable. Mancozeb has a half-life of as little as 6 days in the environment. This is from Plant Protection Science, Volume 45, published in 2009. Number 7, most synthetic pesticides are used in very low quantities as compared to organic pesticides. An unbelievable amount of dollars are expended to test conventional pesticides to determine their safety and environmental impact. They tend to be more site-specific to the target pest compared to their organic counterpart, and generally safer to beneficials. We as a society are living longer than has ever been recorded in public history. Many believe this is because of the affordability of fruits and vegetables as a result of conventional agriculture and the tremendous production levels that have been achieved. We currently enjoy the
Mr. Francis, the time is up.
cheapest, and most nutritious food supply.
All right, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you. The con side will now have 4 minutes for a rebuttal. Mr. Swann, take it away.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Jim Stokely for putting together this debate and for assembling this panel of experts to debate the subject. According to Mahatma Gandhi, the expert knows more and more about less and less until he knows everything about nothing. Well, the older I get, the more I realize what I don't know, so I guess that means I'll never be an expert. Nonetheless, I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here tonight. Well, what is food security? The best definition I've read is from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. This is a quote: "Food security exists when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food." I would argue that most of the food insecurity in the world is due to social policy and inequitable distribution, not lack of supply, regardless of where or how the food was grown. If the agricultural production capacity of the world that is dedicated to industrial monocrop production all went to directly feeding people, we wouldn't be having this debate, because the food insecurity would be an issue. But for the sake of this debate, we will address whether organic or local food can substantially address food insecurity. The usual argument, which has been presented already tonight, boils down to the economic issue. Which is cheaper, chemical or organic? Well, it often is cheaper to grow conventional chemical crops as measured by yield per acre for some crops for the short term, but there are also many studies that suggest that organic can yield competitive with chemical agriculture, especially after a year or two of transition, and especially in the areas most hard hit by food insecurity and climate change, such as Africa and Southeast Asia, where the need is most urgent. Studies by the Rodale Institute, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, the Union of Concerned Scientists, Iowa State University, the University of Michigan, the University of California, Davis, the University of Essex in England, and the Danish Institute of Agricultural Sciences, and others, all show the economic viability and overall social benefit of organic or agroecological agriculture. My conclusion after reviewing these studies is that yes, organic methods can in fact substantially reduce food insecurity, especially in those areas where the insecurity is the greatest. Just like you can make your car go faster by putting nitromethane in your gas for a while, till the engine burns out, you can use industrial chemical methods for your food system until the environment won't support it anymore, and then it will crash. I would argue that the more important issue is ensuring the long-term existential viability of our food system, which is ultimately based on the health of the biome in the soil, biodiversity, water usage, resiliency in a changing climate, healthy pollinator populations, and sustainable production and distribution methods that aren't dependent on petroleum and patents held by giant global corporations. Food security, to me, means not being dependent on petroleum and patents, but instead having a diversified, distributed, and adaptive food network that serves the need of the people, as organic and local as it can be. There are also larger intertwined social and physical aspects of food security. Social policy determines physical and economic access. Particularly in this country, we live in a first world land of abundance. There's a dichotomy between the first and third worlds, where the most extreme food insecurity on the planet occurs. What are the food insecurity consequences of land taken for chemical monocropping, removing it from the local villages and forcing the villagers to make money to buy the food they used to grow? But whether by multinational corporations or from war, people who are displaced from their land lose the security of being able to feed themselves. I think the best social policy globally would be to develop sustainable village-level food systems to help people feed themselves wherever they are on the planet. I previously mentioned that I'm no expert, but the people at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations are, and I suggest you check out their website at www.fao.org. They have a lot of work in this, and their general consensus is that the natural and organic methods can, in fact, feed the world, and we really have to do this in order to address the issues, the negatives with conventional agriculture. I have reports from all of the sources that I previously listed documenting mega studies covering thousands of acres, actually millions of hectares, and 57 countries, this sort of thing, across the world that have been done by the organizations that I just mentioned, all of which point to the viability of organic agriculture.
You'll have to wrap it up there.
Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Quite all right.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right, now we are coming to another 3-minute crossfire. Before we get to that, I want to make sure, could y'all all hear them okay on the last crossfire? Okay, last time we had a little trouble with them. Can you hear okay? Saw a hand? Yeah, good, okay. All right, so this is between the last two speakers. This will last for 3 minutes, same kind of format. Remember, you are asking a question. Mr. Francis will let you start and keep it lively.
John, you say that you think that organically grown crops, it's not a matter of yield or production, it's a matter of distribution. Is that what you're saying is your argument on that particular issue? Or?
Yes, my argument is that you can show short-term benefit, and I agree with that. There are studies, and a lot of them show short-term benefit, but looking at the longer view of sustainable systems and keeping our food system for the long term, that the organic methods are far superior to the conventional chemical agriculture, and that particularly as I was studying the studies here, there's a real difference between the first and third worlds, which is why I mentioned that. In the third world, in countries that don't have a well-developed agricultural system like we do in this country, the benefits are dramatically better, and that's where this needs to happen. It's one thing. Food security in this country is a whole different thing than it is in sub-Saharan Africa or in Southeast Asia. Those are the places that it works, and it is the only answer because the conventional methods just don't apply there like they do here.
John, let's let Chuck jump back in.
Yeah.
I think he's itching to say something.
Well, I disagree with that because I think that unfortunately people live in this world in areas that are not going to be productive, and I think it's going to be the responsibility of the folks that live in areas that do have agricultural worthy land to step up and start producing as much as possible. And I argue that most of our growers are not monoculture growers. They do rotate crops. Even in the Midwest, where you think of nothing but corn, from as far as I can see, there's a corn soybean rotation with wheat a lot of times. So there's a lot of different cultures going on in our agriculture nowadays. And yes, there was a time probably when people were going back to back without rotation, but rotation is very important even in conventional and or organic production.
John, you get to respond.
Okay. Well, I agree certainly that rotation is a very important thing. I would just like to mention a couple of points here. Report to the General Assembly, UN General Assembly, from Oliver de Schutter, who's the special rapporteur for the right to food, studied 57 countries, 37 million hectares, and they found that organic methods, or what they call eco-agriculture, increased the crop production by 79% over conventional crops. Another study studied 40 projects in 20 African countries, and in that one they increased 213% over 3 to 10 years. A 30-year trial at Rodale Institute showed a similar increase in.
We're gonna pause there. I'm
in
sorry.
organic
We're out
production.
of our three minutes.
Okay.
Chuck
right.
was itching to say something,
Very
but
good.
3 minutes ran out. All right. Now at this point, we have a summary for each side gets to do a summary. They also get a luxurious 1 minute and 30 seconds to prepare for that. So we're going to let them spend 1 minute and 30 seconds preparing before their final summary or their summary argument. Alrighty, that is your minute 30. Pro side, this is the first speaker. Bill, that would be you. You get 3 minutes to make your argument.
I'm going to stick with the 6 concerns I have. My opening remarks. Because we can easily defend the position that organic production alone cannot feed the world. The loss of farmable land, the labor, the cost of damage from increased tillage, and others. But the question to me brings great pause. So why are we even asking this question? You know, I'm willing to stand here in this debate. It's not about what's a farmer afraid of. We ought to be asking him. I'd be asking Jamie, Chuck, as a farmer. Farmers know the weather. They know it's either going to be too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry, don't they? And they deal with that. But what they cannot deal with is government policy. And every economist will tell you that. If you don't believe it, ask the tomato growers a few years ago when there was an E. coli scare. Market went to nothing. You couldn't give one away. You couldn't find one anywhere. Okay? What was it? We're out of Mexico. But it killed our market. Took 3 years to overcome it. Recently, ask Chipotle restaurant what E. coli does. Changed their business model. No longer will they accept local food. Ask an organic grower of any kind and conventional what GAP certified means. What the new FDA law called Food Safety Modernization Act means. Public debate like this is important, but it ought to come from the growers. And that's the biggest part that I have, the question. Are the people that are totally affected making the comments because they're the ones that's going to make the public debate? They're going to change policy. Are they aware of that? And a question keeps coming up that the third world countries want to live as they do. That's a Jeffersonian agrarian ideal that came from America as well. It would be wonderful. But I'll tell you, if you visited these countries, they're heading to the city as fast as we did. That is the situation that we're in. So it's not as easy as that. Again, think globally, act locally. Accept what's happening. Remember, when you say something, it can have all the way to Washington and make a debate and make policy for what the growers have to live with.
Bill left 25 seconds on the clock there. I feel like he should have called Jamie low energy or something, but we'll appreciate you leaving a little time on the clock.
Jamie, I'm going to tell you something about I've known him a long time, worked with him. There's nothing worse than have to be up here and debating a good friend and somebody that everybody in Asheville knows.
And if you've ever seen Jamie on the farm, you know he ain't low energy. I can tell you that. All right, Jamie, you now have 3 minutes to deliver your argument.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Bill. Good conversation, guys. And I think we're realistically probably in agreement on about 95% of our approach to agriculture, because we both firmly believe in the future of farms and the culture of agriculture in this community so much. And the real question that I find in this debate and every day on the farm is the challenge I have with sort of the feed the world dogma that sort of infects the entire agricultural conversation in the current day is that it really leaves a lot of people behind, and there's a lot of people, a lot of farms that I know that have gone out of business because that economic model doesn't work for their particular farm. And that to me is a real concern, and that's where I see a real bright light for the organic and local food movement to step in and create the economic opportunity for people to be able to stay on their farm, to be able to stay in production agriculture and do it a different way, and have those conversations with consumers that ultimately drive their production practices and give the farmer a shot at keeping what people on the farm. And so I think that's really where I come at it from. I don't, I think that anybody that's a certified organic farm like we are knows what a headache the rules can be, and I think that there's certainly the rules of the stickiness of all this stuff and GAP and all the things that we all deal with in agriculture on a specific level. We can all sit around and eat breakfast together and moan about all day long. But I think that the real embrace that we should have in the agriculture community is for the diversity of thought that this movement creates. Because I think that too often what we've done in agriculture is anybody that mentions organic sees it as a threat to their core values. And I think that is a dangerous mentality to fall in, because we as farmers have to be more innovative, we have to be more entrepreneurial, and we have to find a way to stay, my job as a farmer is to feed, my community and my family and stay in business ultimately, and feeding the world as a dogma. I think we can be left to the academics and enjoy those conversations and have those conversations, but don't necessarily let those conversations divide us and leave us with one path towards the future of food production. And that's where I get very concerned and see what's happened in many of our rural communities throughout the country. When you drive around rural eastern North Carolina or anywhere in the country, driving through Missouri recently, you see that the way you can find a small town anymore is a Dollar General and a Walmart. And that's pretty much what's happened to small towns. And that concerns me. I think we've got to find a way to really build a stronger social fabric for our societies and for our country. And that's where I'm sort of coming at this from, and think
Jamie,
ultimately the value of the argument sits.
That is time. Thank you, sir. Okay, now we will have a grand crossfire. This is where we don't want unintelligible yelling, so keep that in mind. This is between all four speakers. You can go back and forth. We hope try to be polite and keep your responses as tight as possible. I know you've all got a lot of facts and stats you want to cite, but try to keep it as concise as possible. And we'll let the pro side begin, as Jamie was speaking last. Don't be low energy here, folks.
I'll just probably ask John, let's go back to the question about the third world countries. I understand that. I was fortunate to meet Jim Richardson that wrote the National Geographic article or took the pictures. And he had the same opinion until he went around the world and took those pictures of all the types of crops. And if you've never seen that, it's 9 billion people, how to feed them. It's a great article. But I think that has a point sometimes. But I just want to say, do you feel like everybody in the world wants to live on a farm and they can feed themselves?
I feel like everybody in the world wants to eat. That's the most important thing.
That's absolute truth. 3 times a day if they can get it.
And I feel that the best shot we have at meeting that need is to develop farming systems that are sustainable over the long haul, especially when we're dealing with climate change, drought, we're dealing with deforestation, we're dealing with a lot of environmental stresses on the agricultural system. And the natural and organic methods are far better at adapting to those stresses and producing crops consistently, which is shown by a lot of research. There's right here, including this report from the United Nations Organization for Agriculture and Food Security. They adamantly say that this organic agriculture is not only good for the land, it breaks the circle of indebtedness with the local small farmers. It attracts entrepreneurial entrance into the into the field, which is the
John,
opposite of what Jamie was talking about with losing farmers.
I'm going to give Chuck a chance to
Okay.
respond,
Go
because I
ahead.
can see he's got a point to make.
I disagree somewhat because I think that, I honestly don't think that everybody would want to go to farm the fields every day to be able to feed themselves. Yes, I would. If I was starving to death, I'd be the first one out there with a hoe trying to grow something. But my point being is that fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of folks are living in urban environments and they're just not going to be able to possibly produce crops to feed themselves. And the research that I've read, it doesn't concur with what you said. The data just doesn't support that. And it's the study that I pointed out earlier from UC Berkeley, where they studied 115 different world-renowned researchers from across the world, that the organic production is just not going to be able to keep up with conventional production. And I disagree that organic is going to go, that conventional farming is going to degrade the soil or somehow destroy the environment. I disagree with that.
Jamie?
I have a quick question. What political concerns do you guys have as far as the organic farming movement goes? Like, what legislation would be the concern that might get passed that would affect all of agriculture?
That it would require a certain percentage without having any impact on what that would mean to our local farms. Farming has to be profitable. To
Right.
force somebody to do something that they're not accustomed to.
But is there any specific legislation?
No.
No.
No, there's none there.
Right.
But that's kind of debate can happen.
Right.
And that's what gives me great concern.
Right. I agree with that. I think that on-farm profitability is clearly going to be the critical answer to that. But also interested to hear, what do we do in agriculture as an agricultural community to continue, because the Feed the World
20
idea
seconds.
is, what's that?
20 seconds.
The Feed the World idea is strong. How do we have that not have such a negative impact on the regional farms that we have here in Western North Carolina for them to stay in business?
Exactly what you're doing. There's nothing wrong with the local movement.
Right.
There is wonderful. It's the greatest thing in the world. Somebody can get cash money for what they're doing.
Time, gentlemen. That was a good discussion. All right, here you get that luxurious minute 30 again to prepare for your final focus. Each side will get a final focus that's 2 minutes. Then we'll go into judge deliberation. So we're going to give them a 90-second prep time. All right, gentlemen, the prep time has expired. We will go into final focus, which is 2 minutes. We start with the pro side, and this is the second speaker. So, Chuck, I believe that will be you. Are you going to let Bill do it, or you want to do it from the podium? I think. I just want to make you stand up and down a few more times. Podium will be good.
In my closing comments, I'd like to say, in quotes, roughly 800 million people suffer from hunger and malnutrition, and about 16 million of those will die from it. If we were to switch to organic farming, the number of people suffering would jump by 1.3 billion, assuming we use the same amount of land we're using now. And this is from Christy Wilcox in Scientific American Magazine, July 2011. Unquote. I do not think that people who are starving are going to care whether their food is organic or locally grown. I think that although locally grown and organic will help supply the world food demand, it will not answer the global food security question. All technologies will have to be employed to answer the call to feed the world, and it will have to address not only the environmental aspects, but the moral aspects of the question. Can we really afford to use some of our agricultural production to fuel our cars? I don't know. Can we work together to feed the world in a safe and environmental manner? Yes. I currently sell products to both organic and conventional customers. What do I see happening on the farm today? I see growers who are using all the tools at their disposal to meet the demand for world security. I see conventional growers implementing organic approved products and organic practices. I see organic growers struggling to control pests with the tools that they are currently given. My hat is off to both growers because being a farmer is one of the toughest jobs there is. I believe that given the challenge, we as American agriculture can and will meet the challenge of feeding 9 billion people by 2050. Thank you.
John Swann, you will now have 2 minutes for your final focus.
I'd like to finish up our position here from a quote from the Union of Concerned Scientists, a position paper that's called Scientists Call for Public Investment in Agroecological Research. Quote, agroecology has a proven track record of meeting farming challenges in a cost-effective manner. Research has found that applying agroecological methods can result in high yields. In addition, long-term studies have found that the organic practices typically improve soil health compared to plots where conventional practices are applied and may produce comparable yields. This research has demonstrated that economic returns for organic crops can be greater than for conventional crops despite higher labor costs. And that paper was signed by 349 agricultural experts from universities and research centers around the United States. In addition, there's a paper that was titled The Debate on Feeding the World by Fred Kirschenman, a distinguished fellow at the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture at Iowa State University. Quote, the agroecological side of the debate is now demonstrating that alternatives exist. Proponents for agroecology argue that those alternatives may not only produce as much or more food than the same acreage, but also could do so while enhancing rather than destroying biodiversity and the myriad of environmental and agricultural services that biodiversity provides. So we have conflicting science, and you can, like the blind man and the elephant, you can look at this issue from some different sides and get different perspectives. But the point is that we do have a crisis of food insecurity in the world. We need to look at all approaches, and that includes organic and ecological practices as well as conventional. And that, in fact, agricultural practices that do follow organic methods can substantially reduce the problem. Now, can it solve the problem entirely? Perhaps not. But it is certainly something that we need to look at. I think it's certainly something that needs to have research done and development made into that area because it does, if you look at the long-term survivability of the food systems on the planet, it's very clear that that's the way we need to go. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, we are going to go into the judges' deliberations. They will decide technically who wins this debate. Before they start doing that, we're going to take some questions from the audience that do not go into that ascertainment. But I think we should have a rousing round of applause. These guys are obviously all very knowledgeable. I'm going to come down and walk around. So if you have a question, raise your hand and don't be mad at me if I don't get to you. Okay? And we're trying to ask questions of both sides. All the way in the back here. Hang on just a second. You could have walked to me.
So this debate was a lot about agriculture, which makes sense because we're an agrarian society, but it was also mentioned like third world countries like Somalia, let's say. And in Somalia, over 55% of their population are all nomadic herders, which is also organic and is also what we could consider eat local. So in terms of like eat local movements or organic movements, how does those types of food security benefit the whole world as a whole? Like how can we address other types of food sources in this debate?
So you're asking how we can address sort of different types of food production throughout the world.
What I'm taking from that, Jamie, is how could you learn from other food production techniques in other societies and what they're doing, and could that be applicable here in the United States?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because I think that generally speaking, most of the quote-unquote experts in agriculture are certainly mostly American, very Western-oriented sort of people, education-wise. And I did have the opportunity in 2004 to travel to Italy to the Slow Food Conference, which was an international conference. And slow food can probably more easily be defined as not fast food. And And so you end up, like I ended up in a conversation with a camel breeder from Somalia, actually, and we were talking through an interpreter, and I was trying to learn what you select for in a good camel, and it was a cool conversation, and it was so beyond the reality of what I do every day that it was neat. But I think what's important about that is that we don't have sort of a monoculture mentality of we know how to solve the world's problems here, and we do listen to other cultures and see what they have to offer as well, and celebrate the little things in all food cultures that make them unique and contribute to culture.
Jamie, or Chuck, or Bill, would y'all like to chip in on that one? Y'all look so happy, Bill.
Well, I can tell you, in trips overseas, they do have different ways of eating. They also eat a lot of different things that we do. Chicken feet and things that they're not a delicacy here, but we've turned them into an agricultural product that they actually have and want to supply. So whether it's organic or conventional, it's something that we used to grind up and make into dog food is turned over to them as a supply. So we are supplying the world with food products. We just don't realize it sometimes.
Right.
And we've learned cassava melon was something that comes from all these types of Sprite melons. We have all kinds of products come from around the world.
But it is changing here now because we can't keep chickens' feet in the farm store.
No, they won't.
won't. People love chicken feet.
Yeah.
So.
I thought that was just for my paycheck. I got a question over here.
Hopefully I can frame this. I used to live in eastern Kentucky, and when I lived there, everybody gardened. I think you mentioned about everybody gardening, and that was the way they got their food primarily. Now, a generation later, they're teaching people to farm again because the economy is so poor. And I think projecting this to the need, not only in the United States, but in poor cultures around the world, knowing how to farm and not having the resources cash-wise to buy chemicals, that there is a benefit to having organic farming as a knowledge and a tool for the self-grower. And I'm just curious if any of you have an opinion about that. That's not the farmer, maybe in the sense of a big farm, but the individual farmer teaching people to do organic to save money, resources, but feed their families.
Absolutely. I wish we could do more of that. Not only organic, but any way that you can produce it. That's the point of this. Is we have to be able to do that. My wife and I have several community gardens that we put in, and they were growing those things essentially organic. You know the problem? You can't get anybody to come pick it. It's hard to give it away. We have to pick it and take it to them. So food insecurity is not just about what's produced in the Midwest. We've got to answer some questions about how do we even get people to understand that $5 can buy a bag of beans, some cornmeal, some lard, a piece of salt meat, or they can buy a DiGiorno pizza. It's all in the same, and that's part of the security that bothers me more. So you're exactly right. We've got to teach people to go back to be self-sufficient too.
Yeah, I'd like to just throw my 2 cents in on that. Remember the victory gardens in World War II, where a large, I don't know the numbers, but a large percentage of our food was grown in people's backyards. We took ownership of our own food, and that is something I think that we need to do on a much larger scale than we do currently. We've become very lazy, especially in this country, relying on the supermarket. And that, consequently, our youth at this point think the potatoes grow in the back room of the supermarket. Literally. Some of the work I've done with ASAP in the food farm to school, the youth are very detached from where food comes from. And I think as a society and as a people, we need to reconnect with our food sources in a big way, and that applies here as well as in the third world countries.
All right. Bill, I'd just like to say a lard and cornmeal pizza sounds pretty good to me.
That feeds you one time, though, right?
Got a question here.
Okay, maybe I'm missing the gist of this whole debate, but an issue here that I think we've failed to address is the price to the consumer of the organic products. In other words, I can't afford organic products because they cost so much more than conventional. And if you look around here to the audience, I don't see anyone, any people of color in here. And most of those people cannot afford that. And most of the people in the world aren't white, middle class people, and they don't have the income. So if I can't afford it here in Asheville, how can some resident in Quito, Ecuador, who lives in an urban area, how would that person ever be able to afford it? And if it is a matter of price, then we've only got about 33 years before we're at 9 billion, and there's going to be a lot of people shut out, because right now a lot of people are being shut out because of the price issue.
Yeah, I'd like to throw my 2 cents on this one too. A lot of the studies that I've been reading, especially from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, address that very issue. Most of the research is being done in the United States and in Western Europe, but most of the subject of the research is in third world countries. And that is exactly one of the points, that the third world countries are economically depressed, and that the farmers there don't have the money to buy the chemicals that they would have to buy in order to farm, and they also don't have the training. And so a lot of the efforts that are being made are to train those people to use local inputs, be it green manures or animal manures, and rotational cropping, and all the various techniques that there are, in order for them to produce food without having to put a large cash outlay. So again, it's kind of it's a little bit of apples and oranges between the first world and the third world. And particularly what I'm reading is that the third world is exactly where this needs most to be applied. But I agree with you, there is a real problem, and I think a lot of it has to do with agricultural subsidies. That the federal United States policy has been for the last however many years to support bigger is better, monocropping, and large company farms, large corporate and industrial farming. Without those subsidies, it's a real question whether that would be happening.
There's not industrial farms. That's a bad name to say. 87% of the farms in the United States are family farms. 137 acres as a whole. So when you use industrial farms, it's an insult to farming, and whether you're organic or conventional.
I would disagree. Most of the food on the supermarkets is industrially.
Why would you call it that? They're family farms that produced it.
Because a family farm could be industrial farming. It absolutely can.
So a man that makes a profit and keeps a farm, it's been there for 100 years in a generation, because he sells cornflakes in the grocery store in a package, he's an industrial farmer.
No, I'm not saying because you sell cornflakes. I'm saying because he has a chemical and industrial process, and it's
let's leave
subsidized by
that.
the government.
Let's leave that there for right now.
Yeah, that would make
Bill,
me even baller than I am. That's what it is.
Bill, I can't believe I called you low energy earlier.
No.
I got a question.
Real quick, I have one quick thing to add about that, because
Yeah,
price,
go ahead, Jim.
I would say primarily is due to infrastructure. Most of the sort of mainstream food in the supermarket is produced on such a scale that the infrastructure, the trucking, the production, the packing houses, all that stuff is done so efficiently that the price is largely due to the reflection of that. We raise grass-fed beef. Our production model is a little bit more expensive, probably 5-10%, but most of our cost increase incurs through the distribution, through processing, all those things. And anytime you have a new paradigm like this, and you got to differentiate it all the way through the whole chain of custody, then it can get very cumbersome.
Great.
So that's something that's important.
I got another question here.
If you go to any soil and water office, you might see a poster that says it takes 500 years to create 1 inch of topsoil.
Correct.
And so Bill knows this very, very well. Our farmland is incredibly precious, and the best farmland is hard to come by. And we're developing it at an astonishing rate, as Bill made reference to before. So going back to the issue of policy, what could the government do to incentivize protecting farmland for farmland?
Basically what they've tried to do in the past, and we've abandoned it. They mentioned a little while ago about subsidizing farming. Yeah, there was a time that because of low prices and the need for food, people were paid not to grow a crop because the prices would go so high and they would go so low. And that was in 1935. They changed that and made that into that point. It kept us afloat. It was about commodities. Wheat, rice, and corn feed this world. All the tomatoes, all the other things are extra if you get them. But those three things we better take care of. She's exactly right. Do we have to go back to that kind of thing? I don't know. But right now it's the open market. Grow it, sell it.
I think there's a lot of neat conversations going on in this whole sort of carbon conversation about
Sure.
global warming and all these things, and that stuff gets tricky quickly on how you manage farmland. But I do know that with grazing and there's a great research going on with high density grazing and cattle production, where you can put a lot of cattle on a small amount of land, and it's a lot of research is being done in Zimbabwe by the Alan Savory Institute, and they're showing remarkable increases in organic matter increases in soils through those types of grazing management decisions. That's exciting stuff to me, and I don't know, regulatory wise, I get concerned because it's so hard to quantify and create metrics surrounding all these things. So it's a real challenge for all the computer modelers out there to put together something that we can all get on board with.
Particularly when only 1% farm.
And I've got a question all the way in the back here. We're going to take, I think I can get 3 more questions in. I've got some folks lined up over here. This young lady's been waiting quite a while.
So right now enough food's actually grown to feed the world, but most of it's used to feed livestock or it's thrown away. So it's the feed the world mantra the wrong thing if we already can feed the world? Like how does this relate to food security if we already have food security, but we're not using it?
So your question is, we already grow enough food to feed the world. We throw away 40% of the food that is currently already grown. And what was the other part?
Turning into protein.
Oh, we're feeding all corn and soybeans to livestock.
Yeah, 2 parts, food going to livestock and then the sustainability on that.
Good question. I think that it sort of speaks to paradigms. I think that we can sort of analyze agriculture from a macro standpoint all day long and see how we can change what we feed to livestock, what we don't feed to livestock, and how this changes that. And there's so many factors to consider that it's a real challenge to do that. For throwing food away, I think that's a totally sad statistic when I read that when I was researching this debate. But I also have 3 boys and they don't eat all their dinner, and I'm not supposed to tell them to overeat.
Give you a good example of that.
Yeah.
Apples.
Yeah.
We put apples in the school system, whole apples, and they get thrown in the trash. We did an experiment and cut them, sliced them, and they eat every one of them. Now, what in the world? How do you do that?
Right.
You've got some hard questions, but think about agriculture as a systems approach. Organic depends on the animals for the fertility. The animals depend on the plants. You put it together, it's a systems approach. If we start looking at that, the other thing to be critical on is, never have mentioned it tonight, be careful. What we did and I was part of it. I went to the first Earth Day in 1970 in April to hitchhike to Atlanta, but be careful about this policy thing. We got rid of the factories. We cleaned up the rivers. We can celebrate that. We created EPA, my generation. But did we really? I went to China. Smog. Rivers are running red in colors every different day. The soils are polluted, they can't grow anything. We didn't get rid of it, we just put it somewhere else. Do not do that with food because that is our security. Don't let agriculture be exported from this country. Just
Good
like
point,
we did the
Bill.
factories.
Thank you, Bill.
We're already lost. We just lost the biggest protein company in the world, Smithfield, just bought by China 2 years ago.
Hi, my name is Greg, and one of the things that was said earlier struck a note with me, and I haven't heard too much more about it. And I'm an advocate of copyright change and patents. And when food is patented, or in my own layman's thought, seeds are owned, or the knowledge or how it's done, it's owned, Is that really the debate here against organics? Is that corporate ownership of the actual food or the way we can plant it? I don't know, but I hear a lot of that. What do you think of it?
I don't see that there's a lot of crops that still have a lot of public lines that are readily available, and you can save seeds from public lines of different crops. There is a tremendous amount of ownership of technology with companies now. With the fact that they've made advances with different crops, I would say you have to feed back to the corporation that spent the money to develop that technology and pay back the researchers. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent on increasing, say, corn yields or soybean yields through technology, and it's a tremendous investment that they've made. And yes, they have copyrighted it and trademarked it and basically patented.
And universities as well. They get the funding back. That's one thing to remember too. We're not funding our universities for the research. They're having to go out. Most researchers today have to go out and get their own funding. So is it biased or not? Every dollar that's put into research brings back $17 back. We need to fund our universities.
Jamie or John, would y'all like to weigh in on this topic at hand here about trademarks and that sort of thing, trademarking seeds, that sort of thing? Drawing a blank.
It's hard to hear. It's not like we're not listening, folks.
No.
It echoes backwards, and it's hard.
I don't know if y'all wanted to weigh in on this question at hand that was asked about the trademark of seeds and companies owning the rights to seeds, that sort of thing.
It's true.
Well, it's kind of tangential to this argument. Certainly, if we're talking about specifically certain companies that own patents on seeds, it runs counter to the entire organic concept. There's really, to me, the big issue is that one method of agriculture is more life-sustaining. I would argue that's organic. One method of agriculture is based almost totally on petroleum. That would be conventional chemical agriculture. We're running out of oil, folks, and the price we're paying for oil right now, politically, in world affairs, is very high, and it's going to get higher. I would argue that sustainability plays into this again, and that includes companies that own patents on seeds so that the other seeds are disappearing from the gene pool. I think it's a very serious problem. And I have a problem with any company owning the food supply of a country, of a state, any of it.
All right. We got one more question. This will be the last question. No pressure. Make it a good one.
Early on, you mentioned pollinators. We have seen across the world problem with pollinators, with bees getting fungi, with our butterflies are disappearing.
Yes.
Sometimes it's habitat, sometimes it's an encroachment from, say, Mexico on our monarchs, but across the board, which type of farming is more destructive and more conducive to the damage of our pollinators? Without them, we're dead.
Very good point. In fact, in the news today, driving over here, was a new study from the United Nations that was raising big red flag about exactly that issue, that they're estimating that many species are going extinct. And why is this suddenly coming an issue now? And the finger seems to be pointing, with no documentation to back this up, I'll say it, to neonicotinoid pesticides. And that, again, it's a chemical, artificial process that has unknown ramifications and was kind of foisted on the world along with GMOs before adequate testing was done, before research was done over a long time frame. And that is another reason in my mind that we need to focus on organic, because it is the exact opposite of that. It builds diversity, it builds capacity. It builds the soil biome. It helps species of all kinds. And the opposite of that in chemical agriculture does the opposite of that. It reduces the species, it destroys the soil biome, and ultimately, in my opinion, is not sustainable.
Would you like an alternative position on that?
Go ahead, Bill.
As a soil scientist, one thing everything he's talking about is a conjecture, obviously, because we have both sides of data. But the one thing that does, as a soil scientist, that I do know, and has been published for decades, tillage ruins soils. Tillage ruins soils. And every time you do it, you burn carbon. So it's regardless of how you do it, whether it's organic or you use conventional. With conventional, at least, there is conservation tillage. So if we're talking oranges and apples, we're different, but if we're talking the same thing, we do need to make sure that point is made. Organic has to use tillage 3 to 4 times more than conventional ag.
All right. Jamie, did you have one final quick point?
Well, I just think that all that stuff, I know I talked to our local beekeeper a lot about those types of things, and I think part of this whole conversation is just sort of the general international biology of everything as bugs and all these different diseases go around the world through human travel or through whatever, inevitably diseases pop up, and what we're seeing right now a lot is just kind of the results of all that, which is hard to figure out and diagnose.
It's called not big in people. It's going to affect anything we do.
I'd just like to say I happen to notice it. Jamie, you can tell Jamie's a real farmer because he's got 500 years worth of soil on the bottom of his boots. I just noticed that from right here. You know that man was working today. All right, we're gonna leave the Q&A there, and Chloe is gonna take it over, explain to y'all how the judging works, and go through the judges. We'll find out who the winner is.
So for our final segment of our debate, we're going to go to our panel of 5 student judges. These are all varsity debaters on the Asheville High School speech and debate team, and they're going to give us their thoughts on the progression of arguments, and then disclose who they ultimately think won this debate.
Hi everyone, my name is Isaac Polzaretsky. I'm a junior here at Asheville High School. I've been doing congressional debate, which is one of the 3 types of debate, for about 3 years now. So early on in today's debate, both teams agreed on one thing, and that's that feeding everyone is a very, very important thing that must not be ignored. So for me, when looking at the issues from both sides, I identified most of the issues that directly impact how many people can be fed. The pro talked a lot about rising demand and real issues that face farmers, and how organics and local movements make it harder for these farmers to find solutions. And the con went in depth, first about social issues, but then I moved into discussion about soil sustainability and global effectiveness, as well as distribution networks. So when weighing today's debate and thinking about which side had the points which most directly impact how many people can be fed, I, in the end, sided with the con.
Okay, hi everyone, my name is Lizzie Berlin, and I'm also a junior, and I'm a member of the Lincoln Douglas team, which focuses mostly on morality debates. So I weighed the argument similarly to the way that Isaac did, but I weighed it in a different way. So both sides essentially agreed that what the most important thing was going to be who could feed the world and who could sustain the world. And I ultimately saw that the affirmative side could better sustain the world, mostly because the conventional farming, it's going to lead to more sustainability, and not everywhere, as the affirmative mentioned, can support a local organic movement. So we have to look to the fact that not everywhere can support it. So places that can, such as Asheville, should support a local movement, but on a worldwide level, we can't look to the local organic movement to feed the entire world. That's why I voted on the pro side. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Liam Hurley-Matz. I am also a junior, and I also, such as Isaac, do congressional debate. It's about my 3rd year. And I also weighted in similar ways. However, I looked more at every issue, especially the economics and how soil yields and environmental impacts. And I found that it was a very well matched debate. Both sides had counteracting points, and those points canceled out in both favors. However, when it came down to me, I looked at the pro and saw that they clearly claimed the competitive advantage in terms of economics, and they also talked about how few farmers there were. However, they kind of contradicted themselves when they said that organic is fastly growing, which is why I kind of had to give it to the con, because their biggest point about social dynamics and social distribution negated most of the pros' arguments, because it was so well organized that it would include people moving in to distributing the food where it needs to go and actually feeding the world, especially with the global perspective of places such as Africa, where here in the United States, food insecurity is very, very different from food insecurity in such as third world countries. Therefore, I voted in the con. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Tamar McMahon. I'm a sophomore here at Asheville High. I do congressional debates about my second year. So I weighed today's debate on 3 points: on sustainability and adaptability, on feeding the world, and on the economy. So on the first point, on sustainability and availability, I had to give that point to the con, because while the affirmative talked a lot about yields and about how much land it would take, what the con specifically spoke about was how that focus on yields leaves behind a lot of small farmers, which can end up actually decreasing the adaptability of our farming system, and so I had to give that point to the con. Next, I focused on feeding the world. The affirmative again focused on yield. That was the primary point of their debate. However, with the next point about having distribution and about how organic foods are slowly increasing their yields, I had to give that point to the con as well. And on my third point on the economy was not especially addressed by the affirmative. Mostly the con addressed that point. So I had to give that point to the con as well, because they talked a lot about local economies and how this would increase jobs, how it would help local economies grow and foster diversity. So overall, when I weighed this debate on those 3 points, I had to give this debate to the con.
Hi everyone, I'm Sai Malam. I'm a senior and I do congressional debates. When looking at today's debate, first of all, thank you guys so much for coming. I saw excellent points on both sides, and I appreciated the refutation on both sides that was happening, where people were hearing points that were that were not in their favor, and were going to actively working to show their evidence and logic against the points. So first, I want to start with the pro. I appreciated the very real obstacles that you guys presented against organic universal farming. Then you guys cited things very well when you were presenting them. Mr. Francis, I like that you highlighted the competitive advantages of this, to the south, to the southern farming industry the most, including the disease, climate, and insects problems that traditional farming has infrastructure to quickly address that organic farming does not. Also, because of the recent innovation in agricultural science, that practices that are not organic but are going to help us solve some very pressing issues that come up in the future. Mr. Yarborough, I appreciated your examples of the detrimental organic practices, such as requiring more land and decreasing habitat space, and the non-biodegradable pesticides. Sorry about that. What I did not see were like examples of how traditional farming has a lot of environmental degradation, and what traditional farming is doing currently to prevent that from happening. Which is a point that the con side did a very awesome job of explaining, that the longevity of the agricultural industry matters much more than the like feed the world mentality. So Mr. Ager, I appreciated your points about efficiency not being the only standard to hold the organic farming industry to, because of the innovation that it creates. I was a 9th grader, and I created an aquaponics system at my old school through the organic farming movement that was happening there. So I definitely appreciate that. And Mr. Swann, I appreciated your points about the viability of continuing on the path that we are on because of the corporate exploitation of different people around the world. But today's debate, I weighed on 2 things, which were 1, the feasibility of universal organic farming, and 2, how a transition to universal organic farming and local farming could be implemented beyond just the shortcomings of traditional farming. So because of these reasons, I did not. Because of these reasons, I voted pro, because I did not see many of the con arguments address my voter issues. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, judges. And Chloe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the con side has won the debate. So congratulations to the con side. These gentlemen, I don't know if you know this or not, but they agreed before this that whoever lost the debate would handle all the future insemination of Jamie's nastiest, ugliest sow coming up. So Bill and Chuck, congratulations on that little task you get to do. Mr. Stokely would like to add one more thing. Thank you all for coming out, and let's give them one more round of applause.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I thought that debate was wonderful. I'm going to give you a little quiz. How many of you, raise your right hand if you think so, how many of you think this, what you heard tonight was informative? All right, second question and last question. How many of you who saw the Republican debate last night, raise your right hand if you thought that was informative? All right, so here we have a demonstration of what the real power of the spoken word is about. And let's give a hand to these judges who thought long and hard about this. I also want to thank greatly all four of these folks, as well as John Boyle, who he's got some skills as well. Just like Eisenhower about Nixon, give me a week, I'll think of one. But he does a great job. But I particularly want to thank Bill and Chuck. They're from down a little bit more conservative as you go further south toward South Carolina. Bill and Chuck came up here into the lion's den, and they lost 3-2. Can you believe that? There is no loss, as Bill says. And also, John and Jamie made a great tag team. Jamie speaking from the heart and the soil, as you can see on his boots, and John speaking from the research and a lifetime worth of work in this area. So these four folks, they bring 4 lifetimes of interest in agriculture. I do want to say that Wilma Dykeman's third and last published novel was called Return the Innocent Earth. And the plot basis of that novel is a cannery that has invented a spray that will hold vegetables at their peak of ripeness for weeks. And the problem is that an old couple in the mountains of East Tennessee and western North Carolina have gleaned a field of Brussels sprouts, and the wife, Perlina Smeltzer, has died. So you can see the future orientation of that novel published in 1973. So I hope you enjoyed tonight. If you're all interested in marijuana, some people are, come back to our third and final debate on April the 8th, Friday, same time, 5:30, John. And thank you so much for being here. Take care.